demonstration in the square.
Big city,
The boys in blue are everywhere.
big city,
See the blacks in the park.
big city,
Hear the door slam, hear the dogs bark.
big city,
They're keeping the city safe after dark.
big city,
The Minister for Corruption's working late.
big city,
What's the piece of the action in race 8?
big city,
No SB here, he's ringing in the state.
big city,
The blacks at Arakoon have to go
big city,
to keep big business on the go.
big city,
While Joe gets shares in Komalco.
big city,
Who was the bag man? Who was the hit man?
big city,
Who were the front men? Who were the big men?
big city,
In the national scam.
big city.
Hello, is that you, dear?
Big city,
What's that clicking noise I hear?
big city,
Walls have eyes and phones have ears.
big city,
Go to a dance to have some fun.
big city,
Here come the boys with their dogs and guns.
big city,
They don't like punks. Run, Johnny, run.
big city,
Who's that knocking at the door?
big city,
At 6 a.m. it must be the law.
big city,
Right, you know what we're looking for.
big city,
State of emergency for the box.
big city,
Then to show the workers who's boss.
big city,
You think you got rights, they're already lost.
big city,
They don't want to know you've heard it before.
big city,
But if you cop this lot, you'll sure get more.
big city,
Where's you now from 84?
big city.
In 1988, as part of Australia's bicentennial celebrations, Brisbane will host Expo 88. What, you ask, is an expo? Well, ideally, an expo should be a sort of clearinghouse for new ideas and products. It should be an immense market for a better way of life, where all of humanity can buy, sell or barter the techniques for providing a more humane and civilised existence for all the people on the earth. Unfortunately, since the first expos in London and Paris in the mid-19th century, international expositions, as they are more properly called, have been used by monopoly capitalism to clear inner city suburbs of their traditionally poor worker and transient populations to make way for redevelopment and to provide the opportunity for a little real estate speculation on the fringes of the project. Most Australians watched the '67 Montreal Expo live via early satellite technology, and a lot of them went to Japan in 1970 for the Osaka Expo, which spearheaded Japan's penetration of the world's electronics market. More recently, expos have been getting a bad reputation. The New Orleans Expo in 1984 was a financial and critical flop, and the Expo this year in Japan is hampered by organisational fail-ups that have left huge queues and difficult access. We talked to Karen Cameron from the organising authority and asked her about plans and the theme of Brisbane's Expo 88.
Leisure, firstly, countries such as Tonga, San Marino, the Solomon Islands can all promote their leisure and tourist industry. And with technology, we hope that countries like Japan will show us the latest in technology. And as you can imagine, leisure in games such as Pac-Man or amusement parks are enhanced by the latest in technology, which is the latest system for Pac-Man programs, the latest in Ferris wheels or merry-go-rounds, that sort of thing.
Right.
It is going very well. It's all based on our marketing program, of course, and the Expo will pay for itself. We borrow funds from the state government, but the authority is an authority by itself, and we pay back the funds as we go along. We have a number of sponsors who give us money to display our logo and to display in the Expo, and that way they get their business. And
how many people do we expect to come along to the Expo?
Well, we're expecting 8 million people, 750,000 from overseas, and the rest from Australia and Queensland. We expect people not to come just once, but to come back a few times and to make use of our Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast.
So the old has been cleared to make way for the new. I think that old South Brisbane offered a lot to the people of Brisbane in many different ways. It's always been the demi-monde, the half-world of prostitutes, criminals, aboriginals, migrants and destitutes who lived on the outskirts of society. I used to walk through the area regularly when I was a kid, and it supplied a lot of the exciting experiences and thought-provoking events of my childhood. Manhattan Walk, the South Brisbane Club, the smell of the delis and stale beer, the tattooist, the characters, it was real life. Expo 88 means more than the end of a vibrant suburb. It means an end to an alternative power base that has always vied with the official line on the other side of the river. South Brisbane was always the wrong side of the river, and an inferiority complex just made South Brisbane that much more determined to be different. We're going to look at South Brisbane's history to see how it got its distinctive character, what it offered to Brisbane as a whole. Let's begin with this description of the area at the point of first contact between blacks and whites. It was provided by an early convict. The jungle was a tangled mass of trees, vines, flowering creepers, staghorns, elkhorns, towering scrub palms, giant ferns and hundreds of other varieties of the fern family, beautiful and rare orchids and the wild passion flowers, while along the riverbank were the water lily in thousands and the convolvers of gorgeous hue. That was the state white people found South Brisbane in, but to the Aboriginal people who lived in the area for generations, it was a relative paradise, and many tribes gathered at the Bora rings in the area for ritual celebration. We spoke to Bob Weatherall from the Foundation for Aboriginal and Islander Research Action about the significance of Musgrave Park.
And the evidence that we've got is that Aboriginal people have always been here, and it's always been a gathering place for Aboriginal people, or a coming together place. In fact, some historical records that we've shown, as in photographs, depict Aboriginal people camps just along this area here.
Right, was it the Bora rings and meetings like that here?
Yeah, well, if you look around, you can see sort of built-up areas, and you can see the natural ground, and that still exists here. And some places over here, there's a Bora ring up that way, and that Bora ring leads over to another Bora ring over here, and there's another big Bora ring that goes right in the dead centre of the cricket grounds, the Gabba cricket grounds.
Right, and they linked up. I like this Bora ring that now's got a church on it over there.
Yeah, and there's also some burial grounds around here somewhere. There has been a few people buried around here as well. And the significance to Aboriginal people is that we can look at it as a historical significance, sacred significance, or a social significance, and that's it's a good thing for the Aboriginal people of this town here, Brisbane, to sort of know what's actually going on, what's the history of this place, and that sort of thing.
And
they settled it as a port, and then it became, behind the port, a rural area, sort of farming community, which supplied most of Brisbane with its small produce, like it's famous for its strawberries and fruit and vegetables and probably milk and all that sort of stuff.
South Brisbane has always suffered from periodic flooding, and the floods swept away a number of attempts to bridge the river. The original wooden pontoon bridge was destroyed in floods in the 1860s, and the metal bridge that replaced it was swept away in the 1890s. Another bridge was built, and it survived to be replaced by a modern construction just before the Australia Day floods of 1974. So South Brisbane was a different place. Its link with authority on the north side of the river was tenuous at best, liable to interruption by the elements or an act of God. The psychological separation of South Brisbane from the rest was made a political fact in the 1880s when South Brisbane became a separate township. A keen council and the clearing of parts of the suburb in the 1890 floods meant that South Brisbane was well situated to participate in the low-level development that resulted from the early industrial revolution reaching Australia at about the turn of the century. The factories and workshops produced the need for a workforce, which was housed in cramped estates in West End and Highgate Hill. Here's Ros Prosser again.
Well, the port had a lot to do with the industrialisation, apparently, because it's, close to a port, therefore transport's not so difficult. And there were a lot of industries built right on the river, so they could use the river as their access. And with that industrialisation, the rural community, the landholders recognised the need for housing for working class people to work, who would work in the industries, and land development became an even more lucrative business than farming, so that everything was divided up into smaller working class allotments, and that's characterised by very little yard, houses that are sitting on top of each other almost, no space between them, and smaller narrow streets because they tried to squeeze in as much housing as they could to make more money. With what's recognised in Australia as sort of general floods of migration, the West End community has been one of the areas where those floods have ended up, simply because of the availability of employment and cheaper housing, because of the older houses that are there, and also the innumerable number of flats, which are the bigger houses divided up, which are still cheaper than most places in Brisbane.